Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and to episode 3 of my new build garden transformation. In this video I'll show you how I built my garden pergola. Firstly, let's refresh on my plot, the shape of my back garden, the inspo and my very professional artistic plans. If you haven't already, take a look at episode 1 where you'll see how this area was excavated and how the foundations were laid ready for my plans. Don't forget to like and subscribe as I have lots more to show you. So, gluten for punishment. Apparently, the blistered hands from the first excavation weren't quite sore enough, so I started digging up the rest of the back garden. This time solo, my boyfriend was very smartly busy this time around. Touche, Andy, touche. Now, digging up my grass caused quite a stir over on Instagram when a garden transformation reel of mine went viral. Apparently, part of the internet seemed to think that the passengers of Noah's Ark grazed on my back garden grass prior to me digging it up. They didn't. I live in a UK housing estate and this is a fenced off back garden. There are next to no wild animals passing through, no wild habitats or nesting taking place here, I'm afraid. I get the odd house cat, pigeon, etc. Nothing exciting. And whilst I'm justifying myself, I love nature. The dream is to eventually own a property with enough surrounding land to be able to grow my own veg, have a nice big lawn, have dogs, have trees, maybe a pond. You get the picture. This current garden transformation is merely me just making use of an awkward shaped garden in a suburban area. A one that I wish to keep low maintenance, hence no grass, which by the way was patchy, dead, and of rubbish quality. New build estate you'll know what I mean. They literally lay it on top of rubble. It doesn't really ever get much of a good starting chance. So my inspo was based on my love for Mediterranean style gardens, courtyards, so yeah, no grass. Anyways, ran over and back to the graft. If you're as daft as me and choose to dig up your garden by hand rather than hiring a mini digger, and it's a dry summer's day, soak your lawn with a hose before trying to dig it up, as otherwise it's just too hard to break the surface. 2 skips were filled, which equals 4 tons of earth moved. Solo, might I remind you? The perks of a new build estate whilst they're still building on site is endless skips. You just have to butter them up a little bit. And whilst the skips were endless and my hands were hardened, I decided to shift the materials I had hoarded, collected out of the way, and started digging up the new part of the garden, which I extended outwards in episode 2. Now, this was all done with a £12 B&M shovel and some £2 Toolstation gloves, so please don't think that I was using anything fancy. It wasn't long before 2 more skips were filled, and yep, my hands looked like this. Because of the blisters, I decided to saw out the previous gate post as I just could not face any more digging. I then moved on to breaking up the big clumps of mud with a metal rake and raking it out level before I welcomed back my old friend. The perks of living next door to a grounds worker is being able to lend his whacker plate. If you're not as fortunate, don't go buying one of these as they are quite pricey for the sake of a small area that might probably only take you 20 minutes. You can hire them from your local tool hire store. Mine loan these for around £30 a day, £60 a week, so not too expensive depending on the job you need to do. The vibrating plate flattens and compacts the soil down, making a nice solid and level surface. I then rolled out a heavy-duty weed membrane and pegged it into place. Oh, there's Busy Andy coming to admire my work. My ass. What a tinker. You'll be pleased to see that my art is improving whilst I sketch multiple ideas for the next steps. And yes, the reason you tuned in, my pergola. Pergola, pagoda. I say pergola, but let me know what you refer to them as in the comments below. Firstly, I drove around some local timber yards to compare wood type and price. I selected 4 10-foot posts, which were 4x3, and 11 10-foot beams, which were 4x2, and had them delivered. People do always ask us what the cost of the pergola build was, so I'll summarise that at the end for you. To secure my post to the concrete base, I used 4 galvanised steel post shoes, a 6mm masonry drill bit, and 7.5mm concrete screw bolts. The reason the drill bit is smaller than the bolts is so that the teeth on the bolts will nip in and secure to my concrete base without the need for plugging the holes. As well as a price list at the end, I'll list all the products I used in the description box below. I positioned the post shoes onto my base, ensuring they were in line and square. I drew around them with a pencil once I had them in place in case they moved at any point whilst drilling. I then used my first ever drill, which was the Bosch corded hammer drill. I have since upgraded my tools to the cordless DeWalt range. However, I'll link everything in the description box below. This Bosch drill certainly served me well. and I would recommend it as a starter drill if you're not looking to spend a lot on your tools initially. After drilling some pilot holes with a smaller masonry bit, I then switched it for the 6mm bit I showed you previously to drill slightly wider and further into the concrete base. At the time I didn't have an impact driver with hex bits, so I borrowed Andy's snap-on driver and bits from his garage. This drove the bolts into the concrete like a knife through butter. I was then able to position my first post. As my posts were 4x3 and these post shoes are for 4x4 timber, I slotted a scrap bit from a 4x1 fence slat into the shoe before tightening the bolts on the shoe. After each shoe was fitted, I rechecked I was still square each time with a string line, and I just kept repeating the process of drilling and screwing until all the post shoes were in place. Whilst the time lapse plays, I'll just add in some additional advice. So those scrap bits of wood you saw me place in the shoes won't be seen once the full garden transformation is finished, so it makes no difference to me. But if you're building your own and the feet will be on show, perhaps opt for a 4x4 post, as I don't think 4x3 post shoes are sold. Also, I did my garden in sections based on affordability or availability of materials, and also because I was learning as I went. But now that I've done this, my advice to you to make your posts even more secure would be to put them in place before the cement is poured. That way, you have the added security of the set concrete holding the posts in place as well as the bolts. Not a necessity, as my posts are absolutely solid without doing this, but I guess it would add some efficiency and offer a more professional finish. With the scrap bits of 4x1 in place ready, I lifted my posts into the shoes. I used a spirit level on all sides of the post to ensure I was perfectly perpendicular. There's that alliteration again. Before I tightened the bolts on the post shoes to hold the post in place. You can see the teasing it took to get it right. I imagine this would have been a lot easier and quicker with a second pair of hands, but don't let that put you off. If I can do it solo, then you certainly can too. One tip I'll give you when handling rough sawn treated timber is to wear gloves, and that will help avoid splinters. And there we have the base structure complete. The 4 posts are level and secured. I tried to wobble them manually, and despite only a fraction of the post being in the shoe compared to the rest, they really aren't going anywhere. The real test was leaving them this way overnight whilst I went a night shift, and yep, no movement at all when I returned home the following morning. And whilst I was sat in hospital on my break, I browsed options for the rafter ends. I opted for a simple but effective design in the end. It looks clean, modern, and let's be honest, easier cuts. I then made templates so that the overhanging end shape would be the same for each. However, I did still use a tape measure and a square when marking each rafter just to be sure that I was cutting them as uniform as possible. I didn't own a circular saw at this point, and I didn't trust myself to get these perfect with a handsaw, so I used a jigsaw. Now, this jigsaw got me trolled on TikTok as it's unbranded and clearly ancient. However, it was a hand-me-down, and I'm not one to complain for materialistic matters when it's doing the job I intended to do. I was also slated for guiding the jigsaw with my fingers on the base plate. She's gonna lose a finger, they said. Rest assured, I can still give high fives and high tens all round. My fingers aren't in the crossfire of the blade, nor are they on the wood. I was fine. The only issue I did find was a slight bit of resistance from the jigsaw where there were knots in the wood. Could have been due to the age or lack of power in the jigsaw. I imagine a circular saw wouldn't have had difficulty. But not a matter, the job got done in the end. Feel free to make note of how I utilised what I had available to create a levelish cutting surface there. Each end was cut and lightly sanded until I had my 4 cross beams completed, and they look pretty cock on to me if I do say so myself. Next, I marked on the posts where I wanted the crossbeams to sit. I basically wanted them as high as possible whilst avoiding the garage guttering. And because I was building this solo, my theory was to screw some temporary screws on the line that I'd marked, use a string line to find where's level on the opposite post, mark the post and screw in a couple more temporary screws. The screws either side will then act as my second pair of hands, holding the weight of the beam in place, whilst I can ensure it's definitely level before committing to securing it in place. I can't believe it worked. And it's level. Yay! So, because it worked, I then repeated it on the other side of the post, and ta-da! That'll do me. Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt, and if neither of them are available to give you a hand, use some temporary screws to act as a shelf system. Don't fix what isn't broken. I simply repeated the same on the front posts and then used one of my rafters to ensure it was all going to be level. then I could happily commit to securing it. For that, I used heavy-duty timber fixing screws and borrowed Andy's snap-on driver again. The first two beams were secured. Note, I have offset the screws on a diagonal. This offers a better hold and also means you can screw the opposite way at the back without any risk of the screws colliding within the post. And repeat, while first double checking I'm still level. Hey, it's taken shape. Temporary screws removed, and that did me for the day. That post night shift princess needed a cuppa. Back to the grind the following day to cut and fit the rafters. Tie your hair up and wear safety glasses when using machinery, kids. I opted for the same end shape on the rafters that I used for the cross beams to keep it all uniformed. So a quick cut and a light sand for each of them. At some point during this, the ancient jigsaw did retire itself. You'll see the new jigsaw that I opted for later. Again, I just opted for a budget corded jigsaw, which did the job. I have since upgraded to a DeWalt cordless jigsaw for ease, but this isn't really necessary if it's not in your budget. All 7 rafters were then lined up ready to fit. Exposing the wood like this isn't too risky when the timber has already been pressure treated, as the treatment should technically run right through the grain. However, for longevity of the timber, I will seal the wood once everything is built and in place. I then positioned the rafters onto the beams and marked where I wanted them to sit. The theory this time was if I cut along my mark up to the centre of the rafter, like this, it'll slot right into the beam and be solid. Woohoo! Just like this. Apologies for the wobbly camera footage there. It's really hard to hammer and film at the same time. And with that one in place, I just feel like it looks so much cleaner. Nice clean lines rather than just being rested on top. With both end rafters in place, I then centred the middle rafter and spaced out the remaining rafters in between. Progress, 5 down and 2 to go. Also, it's important to use a rubber hammer if you're going to knock these into place, just so you don't dint the wood with a metal hammer. Oopsies, who spotted me place that rafter with the end shape upside down? I'm so glad I noticed that before I made the cuts. And there's the replacement jigsaw making its debut. Dead handy for cutting out the slots on each rafter. Like I mentioned earlier, I've linked what tools and fixings would be needed in the description box below, just in case it comes in handy to you. And there's the last 2 rafters going in. Yes, it looks like a pergola to me. Did we decide whether it was pergola or pagoda? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Although the rafters are nipped in well with the nooks that I cut out, I still wanted them fully secure, so once I was happy that they were evenly spaced out, I secured them with the same timber fixing screws from earlier. And finally, the last thing to do is to trim down the posts, just like that. And there we have it. I've only gone and built a bloody pergola. So pleased with how this turned out. Instead of sitting contemplating how hard it could be, I just gave it a go. And it turns out not that hard. This was a fully solo build. There was no secret helpers behind the lens, so I truly do promise you that if I can do this, having never done one before, then you certainly can too. Any questions at all, please drop them in the comments below and I'll be sure to help wherever I can. Now for the cost breakdown. Some of this is estimated as I did not keep all of the receipts, but it's as close to the true cost as possible. If you made it this far, then thank you so much. Be sure to like and subscribe so that you're around for the remainder of the garden series to see how I go from this building site to my own little Mediterranean inspired garden. With love always, Dalton.